I am Sofia Martinez, 29 years old, and 3 weeks ago I stood on the stage of the James Beard Awards ceremony, tears streaming down my face as they announced that my restaurant, Luna Rosa, had been awarded 3 Michelin stars. The same parents who once told me my cooking was Inedible garbage and that I should stop embarrassing the family with my kitchen disasters were nowhere to be found. They were too busy celebrating my younger sister Carmen's latest social media influencer contract to notice that their failure daughter had just achieved what less than 200 restaurants in the entire world have accomplished. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Growing up in our sprawling hacienda-style home in Scottsdale, Arizona, I always knew I was the odd one out in the Rodriguez family. My parents, Miguel and Isabella Rodriguez, had built a successful chain of casual Mexican restaurants called Abuela's Kitchen that served what I now recognize as completely Americanized versions of traditional dishes. Cheese smothered everything, overly sweet salsas, and portions so large they could feed a small village. It was profitable, sure, but it wasn't authentic. It wasn't the food my actual abuela had taught me to make during those precious summer visits to Guadalajara when I was little. From the moment Carmen was born when I was 7, the hierarchy in our house became crystal clear. Carmen was the golden child, blessed with Instagram-perfect features, natural charisma, and an ability to charm everyone she met. She had inherited our father's business acumen and our mother's social grace, making her the obvious heir to the family empire. Meanwhile, I was the bookish, introverted daughter who preferred spending hours in the kitchen experimenting with recipes to attending the endless social functions that seemed to define our family's existence. The first sign that my culinary passion would be met with disdain came when I was 12. I had spent an entire Saturday preparing what I thought was an elaborate dinner for the family, mole poblano from scratch, the way Abuela had shown me. The sauce alone took me 6 hours, roasting and grinding chilies, carefully balancing chocolate and spices until it reached that perfect complex flavor that danced between sweet, spicy, and earthy. I had also made fresh tortillas, perfectly seasoned rice, and tender braised chicken that fell off the bone. When my parents arrived home from one of their restaurant inspections, I proudly presented my meal. I had set the dining room table with our good china, lit candles, and even picked flowers from our garden for a centerpiece. My heart swelled with anticipation as they took their first bites. The silence that followed felt eternal. My father chewed slowly, his expression shifting from curiosity to confusion to outright disgust. "Sophia, what is this?" he asked, setting down his fork with a dramatic flourish. "This sauce is so complicated I can't even taste the chicken. And why are these tortillas so thick? Our customers expect thin, soft tortillas that don't fight back when you bite them." My mother nodded in agreement, pushing her plate away after just 2 small bites. "Mija, it's too much. Food should be simple, approachable. This tastes like you're trying to show off, and honestly, it's not very good. The sauce is bitter, and everything is too spicy. How do you expect people to enjoy their meal if their mouth is on fire?" Carmen, who was only 5 at the time, had actually been eating with enthusiasm until she heard our parents' criticism. Then she suddenly pushed her plate away too, mimicking their expressions of distaste. "Yeah, Sophia, it's yucky," she declared, even though moments before she had been asking for seconds of the rice. I felt my face burn with shame and confusion. The food tasted exactly like Abuela's, rich and complex and full of the flavors that had made me fall in love with cooking in the first place. But clearly I was wrong. My palate was wrong, my instincts were wrong. "Next time," my father continued, "why don't you help your mother make something normal for dinner? Maybe some quesadillas or tacos, simple food that people actually want to eat." He stood up from the table, leaving his barely touched plate behind. "I'm going to grab something from the restaurant. Isabella, do you want your usual?" As they left to get takeout from their own establishment, I sat alone in the dining room surrounded by hours of work that had been dismissed as inedible. I remember scraping plate after plate into the garbage, watching my carefully crafted mole disappear into the trash, and wondering what was wrong with me that I couldn't even make a simple family dinner that people would enjoy. This pattern repeated itself countless times throughout my childhood. Every attempt I made to cook something beyond the most basic preparations was met with criticism, eye rolls, or outright ridicule. When I tried to make chiles in nogada for Mexican Independence Day, carefully peeling each poblano pepper and preparing the walnut cream sauce that would represent the colors of the Mexican flag, my mother laughed and said I was being too dramatic and that no one had time for such fancy nonsense. When I attempted to recreate my abuela's tamales, spending an entire day mixing masa, preparing fillings, and carefully wrapping each one in corn husks, my father took one bite and declared them dry and flavorless compared to the ones they bought frozen for the restaurants. The fact that I had used lard instead of vegetable shortening, the way Abuela had taught me, was apparently a grave error that made them too heavy and old-fashioned. Even my simple attempts at improvement were met with resistance. When I suggested that our family taco nights would be better with fresh salsa instead of the jarred stuff we always used, my mother sighed dramatically and said, "Sophia, not everyone has time to chop vegetables all day. Some of us have real responsibilities." When I offered to make the salsa myself, she waved me off dismissively. "It's fine as it is, stop trying to complicate everything." The message was clear: my passion for authentic traditional cooking was not just unwelcome in our household, it was actively discouraged. Food was supposed to be fast, cheap, and appealing to the lowest common denominator. Complexity was pretentious. Authenticity was irrelevant if it didn't sell. Meanwhile, Carmen's every endeavor was celebrated and supported. When she showed interest in photography at age 10, my parents immediately bought her a professional camera and enrolled her in classes. When she decided she wanted to be a cheerleader, they hired a private coach and drove her to competitions across 3 states. When she expressed interest in fashion, they funded shopping trips to Los Angeles and New York, treating her developing sense of style as a legitimate business skill. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. Carmen's hobbies were investments in her future. My cooking was a waste of time and ingredients. High school only amplified these dynamics. Carmen effortlessly became student body president, homecoming queen, and captain of the debate team. She had a natural ability to work a room, remembering everyone's names and making them feel like the most important person in the world. These were skills that would serve her well in the family business, and my parents made sure everyone knew it. "Carmen has such a gift for connecting with people," my mother would tell anyone who would listen. "She's going to be amazing at expanding our brand. We're already talking about franchising opportunities, maybe even a Food Network show. She has that special something that you can't teach." Meanwhile, my academic achievements were met with polite acknowledgement at best. When I made honor roll, it earned a brief "That's nice, Mia," before the conversation inevitably shifted to Carmen's latest accomplishment. When I was accepted into the National Honor Society, my parents attended the induction ceremony, but spent most of the evening discussing Carmen's upcoming quinceañera plans with other parents. The quinceañera itself became a perfect microcosm of our family dynamics. Carmen's 15th birthday party was a lavish affair with a guest list of 300 people, a mariachi band, professional photographers, and a catered feast that cost more than most people's cars. Every detail was carefully orchestrated to showcase the Rodriguez family's success and Carmen's role as the crown jewel of our legacy. For weeks leading up to the party, I begged my parents to let me contribute to the menu. I had been practicing traditional dishes, perfecting my technique with guidance from YouTube videos and the few recipes I remembered from my visits with Abuela. I wanted to make pozole the way she had taught me, with hominy and pork shoulder simmered for hours, until the meat was tender enough to shred with a fork. I wanted to prepare fresh soaps, hand-pressed and griddled until they had those perfect charred spots that added a subtle smokiness to every bite. "Absolutely not," my mother said firmly when I brought up the idea for the 3rd time. "This is Carmen's special day, and we're not going to risk ruining it with your experimental cooking. We've already hired the best caterers in Phoenix, people who know how to cook for large groups and deliver consistent results." "But Mama," I pleaded, "I've been practicing these recipes for months. I know I can make them perfectly, and they would be so much more meaningful than generic catering food. These are the dishes that represent our real heritage." My father overheard our conversation and joined in with his typical bluntness. "Sophia, your cooking is fine for family dinners, when we're feeling adventurous, but this is a business event. Half of our restaurant managers will be there, along with our suppliers and investors. We need food that people will actually enjoy, not some history lesson about authentic Mexican cuisine." The dismissal stung, but I had grown accustomed to having my culinary ambitions minimized. What hurt more was the implication that my cooking wasn't just unsuitable for special occasions, it was potentially embarrassing. In my parents' minds, my food was something to be tolerated in private, not showcased in public. Carmen's quinceañera was everything my parents had envisioned: glamorous, popular, and profitable in terms of the connections made and business relationships strengthened. The catered food was exactly what they had ordered: crowd-pleasing, inoffensive, and entirely forgettable. I spent most of the evening in the kitchen, helping coordinate the service, and watching professional caterers execute perfectly serviceable but soulless versions of the dishes I could have prepared, with 10 times more care and authenticity. As I watched guest after guest compliment the delicious food that I knew was mediocre at best, I began to understand something fundamental about my family's relationship with cuisine. For them, food was purely transactional. It existed to serve a purpose: fill bellies, generate profit, create social connections. The idea that food could be an art form, a cultural expression, or a way of honoring tradition was completely foreign to their mindset. This realization both liberated and isolated me. It meant that my parents' criticism of my cooking wasn't necessarily a reflection of its quality; they were judging it by completely different criteria than the ones I valued. But it also meant that I would never find support or understanding for my passion within my own family. My junior year of high school, I made a decision that would set the trajectory for everything that followed. Instead of taking business classes like Carmen, preparing for my inevitable role in the family restaurant empire, I enrolled in every culinary arts course my school offered. I joined the cooking club, volunteered in the school cafeteria, and even convinced the home economics teacher to let me use the kitchen after school for practice sessions. My parents' reaction was predictably dismissive. "It's good that you have hobbies," my mother said, when I excitedly told her about my acceptance into the advanced culinary program. "But don't lose sight of what's really important. You'll be working in the restaurants eventually, so make sure you're taking classes that will actually help you with management and customer service." The assumption that I would automatically join the family business, despite showing no interest in their approach to food, was both presumptuous and insulting. But I had learned to keep my true feelings to myself, nodding along while privately plotting a different course. My culinary instructor, Chef Rodriguez, no relation, despite the shared surname, became the first adult in my life to recognize and nurture my talent. Elena Rodriguez was a graduate of the Culinary Institute of America, who had worked in respected kitchens in New York and San Francisco before returning to Arizona to teach. She had the kind of palate and technical knowledge that I had been craving my entire life, and she immediately recognized something in my cooking that my family had missed. "Sophia," she said after tasting a dish I had prepared for a class assignment, "where did you learn to balance flavors like this? This mole has more complexity than dishes I've eaten in restaurants that charge $50 a plate." The praise felt like water in the desert. For the first time in my life, someone with actual culinary credentials was acknowledging that my instincts might be worth developing rather than suppressing. "My abuela taught me some techniques when I was little," I explained, "but mostly I've been teaching myself from books and videos. My parents think I overcomplicate things." Chef Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "Overcomplicate? This is sophisticated cooking, Sophia. The fact that you developed this palate without formal training is remarkable. Have you considered culinary school?" The question hit me like lightning. Culinary school had always felt like an impossible dream, something that happened to other people in other families. My path was supposed to lead directly from high school to a management position at one of our restaurants, learning the business from the ground up the way my father had envisioned. "I don't think my parents would support that," I admitted. "They expect me to work in our family restaurants." "Well," Chef Rodriguez said thoughtfully, "there's more than one way to work in restaurants. And if you have this much natural talent, it would be a shame to waste it on something you're not passionate about." That conversation planted a seed that would grow over the following months. I began researching culinary programs, reading about famous chefs, and imagining a future where my cooking was celebrated rather than criticized. The more I learned about the professional culinary world, the more I realized how limited and narrow my family's approach to food really was. I started working part-time at a local fine dining restaurant called Copper and Sage, initially just as a hostess to earn spending money. But the executive chef, Marcus Chen, quickly noticed my interest in the kitchen and began letting me help with prep work during slow periods. Under his guidance, I learned knife skills, sauce techniques, and the kind of precision and attention to detail that separated professional cooking from home cooking. "You've got good instincts," Chef Chen told me, after watching me break down a case of vegetables with textbook technique. "Your knife work is cleaner than some of the culinary school graduates I've hired. Where are you planning to study?" When I explained my family situation, he frowned. "Sophia, you're too talented to waste your potential. If culinary school isn't an option right now, at least consider working in better kitchens. Learn from chefs who can push you to grow." The idea terrified and excited me in equal measure.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Working in serious kitchens meant acknowledging that I wanted to pursue cooking as more than a hobby. It meant defying my parents' expectations and potentially damaging my relationship with my family. But it also meant finally pursuing something that I was passionate about, something that made me feel alive in a way that nothing else ever had. My senior year flew by in a blur of college applications, family business meetings, and secret shifts at Copper and Sage. While my parents assumed I was applying to business programs that would prepare me for a management role in their restaurants, I was actually researching culinary schools and working kitchens where I could continue learning. The confrontation I had been dreading finally came during a family dinner in March of my senior year. Carmen had just announced her acceptance to Arizona State University's business program, along with a partial scholarship and an internship with a major hospitality corporation. As always, my parents were effusive in their praise and excitement. "We're so proud of you, Mia," my father beamed. "This internship will give you incredible experience in restaurant operations and marketing. By the time you graduate, you'll be ready to take on major responsibilities with our expansion plans." After the celebration died down, my mother turned to me. "Sophia, I hope you're taking notes. This is how you build a successful career, through strategic planning and making connections with the right people. Have you heard back from any of the business programs you applied to?" This was my moment of truth. I could continue the charade, pretending that I shared their vision for my future, or I could finally be honest about what I wanted. The words came out before I could second-guess myself. Actually, I didn't apply to business schools. I applied to culinary programs. The silence that followed was deafening. My father set down his fork slowly, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to anger in the span of seconds. My mother's face went pale, then flushed red. Carmen looked back and forth between us, sensing the tension but not understanding its source. "What do you mean culinary programs?" my father asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "I want to be a chef," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've been accepted to the Culinary Institute of America, and I have scholarships that will cover most of the tuition. I start in the fall." The explosion was immediate and volcanic. My father slammed his hand on the table hard enough to make the dishes jump. "Are you out of your mind? We've been planning your future since you were born, and now you want to throw it all away to become a cook." "Not a cook," I corrected, though I knew the distinction would be lost on them. "A chef. There's a difference." "There's no difference," my mother interjected, her voice rising to match my father's volume. "Cooking is cooking, whether you do it in our kitchen or someone else's. And you're already terrible at it. Why would you want to embarrass yourself professionally doing something you have no talent for?" The words hit like physical blows. After years of criticism, I had developed thick skin, but this felt different. This was my family dismissing not just my cooking, but my dreams, my future, and my sense of self-worth all in one devastating sentence. "I do have talent," I said quietly, though my voice was shaking. "Other people have recognized it. Professional chefs have told me I have potential." "What professional chefs?" my father demanded. "That teacher at your school, the cook at whatever restaurant you've been sneaking around at. They're just being nice, Sophia. They don't want to hurt your feelings by telling you the truth." Carmen, who had been silent throughout this exchange, finally spoke up. "Sophia, maybe Mom and Dad have a point. I mean, I've eaten your food, and it's intense. Like really complicated and kind of weird."
People want food that tastes good and makes them happy, not food that confuses them. The betrayal from my sister, who I had thought might at least remain neutral, was the final straw. I stood up from the table, my chair scraping against the tile floor with a harsh sound that seemed to echo in the suddenly quiet dining room. "I'm going to culinary school," I said with as much dignity as I could muster. "I've already been accepted, and I've secured financial aid. I'm going to become a chef, and I'm going to prove that my cooking is not just edible, it's exceptional." My father's face was red with anger and what looked like genuine fear. The fear surprised me until I realized what was driving it. Their entire identity was built around the family business, the Rodriguez restaurant empire that would be passed down through generations. My defection wasn't just a career choice, it was a rejection of everything they had worked to build. "If you walk away from this family and this business to chase some ridiculous fantasy about being a chef," he said, his voice low and threatening, "don't expect us to be here when you fail. And you will fail, Sophia. You'll come crawling back in a few years, broke and humiliated, begging for a job in our kitchens. And maybe if you're very lucky, we'll consider giving you a position washing dishes." The cruelty of his words took my breath away. This wasn't just disapproval or disappointment, this was a complete severing of support and belief in my potential. My own father was not just predicting my failure, he was promising to take satisfaction in it. "Miguel," my mother said softly, though her expression remained hard, "maybe we shouldn't be so harsh. Sophia is young and confused. She'll realize her mistake once she's had some time to think clearly." But there was no warmth in her attempt at mediation. She was simply offering me a slightly more gracious way to surrender my dreams and accept their vision for my life. I looked around the table at the three people who were supposed to love and support me unconditionally. Instead, I saw a tribunal of critics who had never believed in my abilities and were now actively rooting for my failure. The realization was both heartbreaking and liberating. "I won't fail," I said simply. "And when I succeed, I hope you'll remember this conversation and realize what you missed by never believing in me." I left the dining room, went to my bedroom, and began packing for a future that would be built entirely on my own terms. The Culinary Institute of America in Hyde Park, New York, felt like stepping into another world. After 18 years of having my culinary instincts questioned and dismissed, I found myself surrounded by people who spoke my language, who understood the difference between cooking and creating art on a plate. The campus itself was intimidating, with its professional-grade kitchens and the constant sound of knives hitting cutting boards, but for the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. My first day in Introduction to Culinary Arts, I was terrified I would be exposed as a fraud. Despite all my practice and the encouragement from Chef Rodriguez and Marcus Chen, a small voice in my head whispered my parents' criticisms. What if they were right? What if my food really was inedible, and I had just been lucky enough to fool a few people? Those fears evaporated within the first week. Chef Williams, our instructor, was a veteran of some of the most respected kitchens in New York City, and his palate was unforgiving. When he tasted my first assignment, a simple knife skills test that required us to prepare a basic mirepoix and demonstrate proper brunoise technique, he paused and looked at me with curiosity. "Rodriguez, where did you train before coming here?" he asked, examining my perfectly uniform dice of carrots, onions and celery. "I didn't, chef, I'm straight from high school." He raised an eyebrow and moved on to taste my sauce, a basic beurre blanc that I had prepared as part of the same assignment. His expression shifted from curiosity to genuine surprise. "This is exceptional work for someone with no formal training. Your sauce has proper emulsification, good acidity balance, and the seasoning is spot on. Keep doing whatever you're doing." The validation from someone whose opinion actually mattered felt like sunlight after years of living in shadows. Around me, other students struggled with basic techniques that felt natural to me. While they burned their roux or broke their hollandaise, I found myself helping classmates troubleshoot their dishes, sharing the instinctive understanding of heat and timing that I had developed through years of experimentation. My roommate Jessica Chen, a bubbly girl from California, whose parents owned a successful dim sum restaurant, became my first real friend at culinary school. Unlike my family, she understood the weight of culinary tradition and the pressure of living up to inherited expectations. "My parents wanted me to study accounting," she confided one evening as we practiced our knife cuts in our shared dorm room. They said the restaurant business was too hard, too unpredictable. But I love the artistry of it, the way you can tell stories through food. I nodded, understanding completely. My family owns restaurants too, but they think my cooking is terrible. They wanted me to study business management so I could help run their operations. Their loss, Jessica said simply. I've tasted your food, you're going to be incredible. Having a friend who believed in my abilities without reservation was a new experience. Jessica and I spent countless hours together, practicing techniques, experimenting with flavor combinations, and pushing each other to be better. Through her I began to understand what healthy support looked like, how encouragement could fuel ambition rather than crushing it. The academic workload at CIA was brutal. We had practical kitchen classes 6 days a week, supplemented by courses in food science, nutrition, cost control, and culinary history. I threw myself into every assignment with the intensity of someone making up for lost time. While other students complained about the demanding schedule, I reveled in the opportunity to learn from masters of their craft. In my French cooking class, Chef Bernard Dubois, an intimidating man who had trained in Lyon and worked in Michelin-starred restaurants throughout Europe, became both my greatest challenge and most influential mentor. He was notorious for his exacting standards and sharp tongue, reducing students to tears with his critiques of their technique or seasoning. When he tasted my first attempt at coq au vin, I held my breath, waiting for the inevitable criticism. He chewed thoughtfully, his expression unreadable, then set down his fork. "This is good," he said simply, "the braising technique is proper, the sauce has good depth, and you understand the importance of building layers of flavor." However, he continued, and I braced myself, "it lacks personality, it's technically correct but safe. A good chef doesn't just execute recipes, she interprets them, makes them her own." That critique haunted me for weeks. I realized I had been so focused on proving I could cook correctly that I had suppressed the very instincts that made my food special. The complexity and boldness that my family had criticized were actually my strengths, but I had been too afraid of judgment to let them shine through. My breakthrough came during a challenge where we had to prepare a dish representing our culinary heritage. While other students created straightforward interpretations of their cultural cuisines, I decided to push boundaries. I prepared duck carnitas with a mole negro that took me 2 days to perfect, serving it with hand-pressed blue corn tortillas, and a salsa verde that incorporated tomatillos, serrano peppers, and fresh herbs. But I didn't stop there. I added my own touches, a microscopic dice of jicama for texture, a drizzle of duck fat that had been infused with epazote, and a garnish of microgreens that provided a peppery counterpoint to the rich mole. When Chef Dubois tasted it, his usually stern expression softened. He took a second bite, then a third, chewing slowly and thoughtfully. "Now this," he said, "is cooking with conviction. You've taken traditional techniques and elevated them without losing their soul. This is the kind of food that tells a story, that makes people remember why they fell in love with eating." The praise from someone I respected so deeply was intoxicating, but more importantly, it confirmed what I had always suspected about my cooking. The complexity that my family found overwhelming was actually sophistication. The weird flavor combinations they criticized were actually innovative. I wasn't a bad cook trying to be fancy, I was a talented cook who had been suppressed by people who couldn't appreciate nuance. Word of my abilities began to spread among the faculty. Chef Maria Santos, who taught our advanced techniques class, started using my dishes as examples for other students. Chef Thompson, our garde manger instructor, recommended me for a coveted externship position at a renowned restaurant in Manhattan. The externship at Ariole, a James Beard Award-winning restaurant in Midtown, was my first real exposure to the professional kitchen environment. Executive Chef Daniel Park ran a tight ship, demanding perfection from every member of his team. As the lowest person in the kitchen hierarchy, I was assigned to prep work, peeling vegetables, making stocks, and cleaning equipment. But I approached even the most mundane tasks with the same intensity I brought to my coursework. My knife cuts were precise, my stocks were clear and flavorful, and I never missed a deadline or made a mistake that affected service. Within 2 weeks, I was promoted from prep to working the cold appetizer station during lunch service. The pace of professional service was unlike anything I had experienced in school. Orders came in rapid succession, Each dish had to be plated to exact specifications, and there was no room for error. If a salad went out with wilted greens or a cold soup was improperly garnished, it reflected poorly on the entire kitchen. I thrived in this high-pressure environment. The same perfectionist tendencies that had made me obsess over my school assignments now served me well in a setting where attention to detail could make or break a service. Chef Park noticed my consistency and work ethic, gradually giving me more responsibilities and allowing me to contribute ideas to menu development. "Sophia," he said one afternoon as we were prepping for dinner service, "you have something special. Your palate is more developed than most cooks with twice your experience, and your technique is solid. But more importantly, you understand that cooking is about more than just following recipes. You cook with purpose." These words meant everything to me, especially coming from a chef whose restaurant had been featured in Food and Wine magazine and whose opinion carried real weight in the culinary world. For the first time since leaving home, I felt confident that I had made the right decision in pursuing this career path. The validation I received in professional kitchens stood in stark contrast to the continued silence from my family. In the 6 months since I had left for culinary school, I had received exactly 3 communications from home: a brief email from Carmen telling me about her engagement to her college boyfriend, a text from my mother asking for my mailing address so she could send tax documents, and a single phone call from my father. That phone call had come during my 2nd month at CIA, late at night when I was studying in the library. Seeing his name on my caller ID made my heart race with a mixture of hope and anxiety. Maybe he was calling to check on me, to see how I was adjusting to school, to offer some belated support for my decision. "Sophia," his voice was tired, strained in a way I had never heard before. "I need to talk to you about something important." "Hi, Papa, how are you? How's the restaurant?" "That's what I'm calling about. We're having some problems with the Phoenix location. The manager quit, and we're losing money every day. It's not properly supervised. I need you to come home and help us get things back on track." The request hit me like a physical blow. No inquiry about my studies, no acknowledgement of my progress or achievements, just an immediate expectation that I would abandon my education to solve their business problems. "I can't leave school, Papa. I'm in the middle of my semester and I'm doing really well. Can't you find another manager?" "Sophia, this is family business. School can wait, but we're bleeding money right now. Carmen is still in college, and your mother and I can't be in 2 places at once." The fact that Carmen's education was sacrosanct while mine was expendable spoke volumes about their priorities. I took a deep breath, knowing that my next words would define our relationship going forward. "I'm not dropping out of culinary school to manage your restaurant, Papa. I'm sorry you're having problems, but you'll need to find another solution." The silence that followed stretched for what felt like hours. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold and distant. "So this is what we get for raising you, for giving you everything. When your family needs you, you turn your back on us for some fantasy about becoming a famous chef." "It's not a fantasy," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "I'm really good at this, Papa. My instructors think I have real potential." "Your instructors are paid to encourage students, Sophia. They tell everyone they have potential. But the real world doesn't care about your feelings or your dreams. It cares about results, about money, about building something that lasts." The conversation ended with him hanging up on me, and I hadn't heard from him since. The silence from my family was painful, but it also reinforced my determination to succeed. Every perfect julienne of vegetables, every flawless sauce, every compliment from a chef became a small act of rebellion against their lack of faith in my abilities. As my externship at Oriole drew to a close, Chef Park pulled me aside for a private conversation. We were in his office after a particularly busy Saturday night service, and he looked more serious than usual. "Sophia, I've been watching your progress over the past 3 months, and I want to make you an offer. We have an opening for a junior sous chef position here at Oriole. It's a real job with benefits, a salary, and the opportunity to work your way up in a respected kitchen." The offer was everything I had dreamed of when I first started culinary school. Working at Oriole would give me credibility, experience, and the chance to learn from some of the best chefs in the country. It was the kind of opportunity that could launch a career. "There's one catch," Chef Park continued. "You'd need to start immediately, which means leaving CIA before you graduate." I know that's a big decision, but in this industry, practical experience often matters more than formal credentials. I felt torn in two directions. The logical part of my brain recognized that this was an incredible opportunity that might not come again. But another part of me, the part that had been dismissed and underestimated my entire life, wanted the validation that came with completing my formal education. "Can I have some time to think about it?" I asked. "Of course, take a week. But Sophia, opportunities like this don't come around often. You have real talent, but talent without opportunity doesn't lead anywhere." That night, I called Jessica to discuss the situation. She listened carefully as I laid out the pros and cons, the excitement and the fear, the pressure to make a decision that could shape my entire future. "What does your gut tell you?" she asked after I had finished explaining the situation. "That I'm not ready," I admitted. "I feel like I still have so much to learn at school, so many techniques I haven't mastered yet. But what if this is my only shot at working in a restaurant this good?" "Sophia," Jessica said gently, "you're incredibly talented and you work harder than anyone I know. This won't be your only opportunity. But rushing into something because you're afraid is never the right reason." Her words resonated with me, particularly the part about fear. I realized that part of my temptation to take the job immediately came from the same insecurity that my family had instilled in me. The fear that I wasn't good enough and needed to grab whatever opportunities came my way before people realized I was a fraud. I decided to finish my education at CIA, turning down Chef Park's offer with gratitude but firm resolve. He was disappointed but understanding, and he told me that his door would always be open if I wanted to return after graduation. My final year at culinary school flew by in a blur of advanced techniques, menu development projects, and preparation for the real world of professional cooking. I specialized in contemporary American cuisine, with Latin influences, developing a style that honored my heritage while incorporating modern techniques and presentations. For my final project, I created a 7-course tasting menu that told the story of my culinary journey. Each dish represented a different stage of my development, from the simple but perfect mole that had started my conflict with my family to a deconstructed tres leches cake that reimagined traditional Mexican dessert in a completely contemporary way. The presentation went flawlessly. Faculty members who had watched my growth over 2 years sampled each course with evident appreciation, taking notes and asking thoughtful questions about my techniques and inspiration. Chef Dubois, who had pushed me harder than any other instructor, was the last to speak. "Sophia, when you first arrived here, you cooked like someone who was afraid of her own talent. You've developed into a chef who understands that confidence and creativity go hand in hand. This menu shows not just technical skill, but a unique culinary voice. That's the difference between a cook and an artist." Graduation day arrived with all the pageantry and emotion I had expected. My classmates and I processed across the stage in our crisp white chef's coats, receiving our diplomas from the dean while family members cheered from the audience. I scanned the crowd for familiar faces, though I already knew what I would find. Jessica's parents had flown in from California, beaming with pride as she crossed the stage. Other students were surrounded by siblings, grandparents, and extended family who had traveled hundreds of miles to celebrate this milestone. My section of the audience was empty, except for Chef Rodriguez, my old high school instructor, who had made the trip from Arizona to see me graduate. After the ceremony, she found me in the crowd and enveloped me in a warm hug. "I'm so proud of you, Sophia. Look how far you've come." The absence of my family at what should have been one of the proudest moments of my life was painful, but it also clarified something important about my future. I was going to build a career and a life surrounded by people who believed in my abilities and supported my dreams. The family that had raised me might not be part of that future, but there were other people who could fill that role. Armed with my diploma and 2 years of intensive training, I returned to the job market with confidence and clear goals. I wanted to work in the best kitchens I could access, learning from master chefs and developing my skills until I was ready to open my own restaurant. My first position after graduation was at Maison Blanc, a French restaurant in San Francisco that had maintained its Michelin star for over a decade. Executive chef Philippe Moreau was a demanding perfectionist who ran his kitchen like a military operation, but he was also a brilliant technician who could teach me the kind of advanced skills that would separate me from other young chefs. Working under Chef Moreau was like attending graduate school for cooking. Every service was a lesson in precision, timing, and the pursuit of perfection. He taught me to make stocks that were so clear, they looked like consommé, to prepare perfect brunoise that required a magnifying glass to detect any irregularities, and to plate dishes with the kind of artistry that made each plate look like a small sculpture. The pace was relentless and the standards were impossibly high, but I thrived in this environment. After years of being told that my attention to detail was excessive and my standards were unrealistic, I had found a place where perfectionism was not just valued but required. 6 months into my tenure at Maison Blanc, Chef Moreau assigned me to work the fish station during dinner service, a position typically reserved for more experienced cooks. The responsibility was both thrilling and terrifying, as fish cookery required split-second timing and could make or break an entire meal if executed poorly. My first night on the fish station was chaotic. Orders came in faster than I had anticipated, and I found myself struggling to keep up while maintaining the precise cooking standards that Chef Moreau demanded. By the end of service, I was exhausted but proud that I had completed every order without sending out a single improperly cooked piece of fish. Sophia, Chef Moreau called as we were cleaning our stations after service. Your technique tonight was solid, but your speed needs work. However, he paused, you showed good judgment under pressure, and your instincts for doneness are excellent. Keep working at this pace, and you'll be ready for more responsibility soon. That incremental praise from such a demanding chef felt like a major victory. In Chef Moreau's kitchen, acknowledgement was rare and criticism was constant, so any positive feedback carried extra weight. Over the following months, I gradually earned more responsibilities and respect within the kitchen hierarchy. Other cooks began coming to me with questions about technique or timing, recognizing that I had developed a reputation for consistency and precision. The breakthrough moment came during a particularly busy Saturday night, when the sous chef called in sick, and Chef Moreau was forced to promote someone temporarily to help coordinate service. To my surprise, he chose me over several more senior cooks. Sophia, you're going to help me run the pass tonight. Watch every plate that goes out, make sure the presentation meets our standards, and help coordinate timing between stations. Working the pass with Chef Moreau was like getting a master class in kitchen leadership. I watched how he communicated with each station, how he could identify problems before they became disasters, and how he maintained quality standards even during the busiest moments of service. When a young cook on the meat station sent up a lamb dish that was slightly overcooked, Chef Moreau caught it immediately. Sophia, what do you see wrong with this plate? I examined the lamb carefully, noting the color and texture that indicated it had been cooked beyond the requested medium rare. The lamb is overcooked, chef. It needs to be refired. Correct. Send it back and tell him to start over. And Sophia, this is why attention to detail matters. One improperly cooked dish can ruin a guest's entire evening. By the end of that service, I felt like I had glimpsed my future. Running a kitchen, maintaining standards, leading a team of skilled cooks to create exceptional food. This was what I wanted to do with my career. Chef Moreau must have seen something in my performance that night, because the following week he called me into his office for a private conversation. Sophia, I've been watching your development over the past year, and I think you're ready for the next step. I'm promoting you to sous chef, effective immediately. The promotion came with a significant raise, more responsibility, and most importantly, recognition that I had earned my place in one of the city's most respected kitchens. At 24 years old, I was the youngest sous chef in Maison Blanc's history. The irony wasn't lost on me that I had achieved more success in 2 years of professional cooking than my parents' restaurant chain had earned in terms of critical recognition in decades of operation. My food was now being served to discerning diners who expected excellence, while their restaurants continued to serve the same predictable, over-seasoned dishes to customers who viewed food as fuel rather than art. But even as I celebrated this professional milestone, I couldn't entirely escape the longing for family approval that had driven me since childhood. Part of me wanted to call home, to share this achievement with the people who had raised me, to prove that their daughter wasn't a failure after all. I never made that call, but sometimes I wondered if they ever thought about me, if they ever questioned their harsh judgment of my abilities, if they ever regretted pushing away a daughter who might have brought something valuable to their family business. Those questions would remain unanswered as I focused on building the career and life I wanted, surrounded by people who appreciated my talents and supported my ambitions. The family I had been born into might not understand my choices, but I was creating a new family of mentors, colleagues, and friends who valued the same things I did: excellence, creativity, and the transformative power of exceptional food. 2 years as sous chef at Maison Blanc had transformed me from a promising young cook into a confident kitchen leader. I had mastered the intricate dance of fine dining service, learned to manage temperamental line cooks, and developed the kind of palate that could detect if a sauce was off by even a few grains of salt. But I knew it was time to take the next step toward my ultimate goal: opening my own restaurant. The opportunity came through Marcus Chen, my old mentor from Copper and Sage, who had kept in touch throughout my career progression. He called me with news that a small restaurant space had become available in Portland, Oregon, in an up-and-coming neighborhood that was attracting serious food lovers. "It's only 30 seats," he explained over the phone, "but it has a full kitchen and the rent is reasonable." The previous owner couldn't make it work, but that was because he didn't understand his market. "You could do something special there, Sophia." I flew to Portland the following weekend to see the space. The moment I walked through the door, I could envision exactly what it could become. The dining room was intimate but not cramped, with large windows that flooded the space with natural light. The kitchen was compact but well-designed, with good workflow and quality equipment. Most importantly, it felt like a place where I could create the kind of food I had been dreaming about since culinary school. The financial reality of opening a restaurant was daunting. Even with my savings from 2 years of sous chef salary, I was far short of what I needed for startup costs, equipment, initial inventory, and operating capital. Traditional bank loans were difficult for young chefs to secure, especially without established restaurant ownership experience. I spent weeks creating a detailed business plan, projecting costs and revenues, designing sample menus, and researching potential investors. The concept I developed was ambitious but achievable: contemporary American cuisine, with strong Latin influences, featuring seasonal ingredients and sophisticated techniques presented in an approachable format. After being turned down by 3 banks and several potential investors who questioned my age and experience, I was ready to give up on the Portland opportunity. That's when I received an unexpected phone call from Chef Philippe Moreau. "Sophia, I heard through the culinary network that you're trying to open a restaurant. I have a proposition for you." He explained that he had been looking for investment opportunities in promising young chefs, and several mutual contacts had recommended me as someone with exceptional potential. He was willing to provide the financial backing I needed in exchange for a minority partnership in the restaurant. "I won't interfere with your creative vision or day-to-day operations," he assured me, "but I'll be available for advice and guidance when you need it. Consider it an extension of your education." 3 months later, I was standing in my own kitchen, putting the finishing touches on preparations for Luna Rosa's opening night. The name, which meant pink moon in Spanish, represented the convergence of my heritage and my dreams: the traditional and the innovative, the familiar and the unexpected. The menu I had developed told my culinary story through 12 carefully crafted dishes. There was duck carnitas with mole negro and blue corn tortillas, the dish that had first earned praise from Chef Dubois at culinary school, but refined through years of professional experience. I created a seafood ceviche that incorporated techniques I had learned at Maison Blanc, using liquid nitrogen to create unique textural contrasts. My dessert menu featured a deconstructed flan, with dulce de leche caviar, and toasted coconut soil that had taken me months to perfect. Opening night was both exhilarating and terrifying. The dining room was filled with local food writers, fellow chefs, and adventurous diners who had heard about the young chef attempting to redefine Mexican-American cuisine. Every plate that left my kitchen felt like a statement about who I was as a cook and what I believed food could accomplish. The first review came from Portland Monthly's food critic 3 weeks after we opened. I was almost too nervous to read it, knowing that a negative review could doom a new restaurant before it had a chance to establish itself. Luna Rosa represents the kind of ambitious cooking that elevates Portland's already impressive dining scene, the critic wrote. Chef Sofia Martinez brings technical precision learned in some of the country's finest kitchens to bear on flavors that are both deeply personal and universally appealing. This is Mexican cuisine, reimagined for the modern palate without losing its soul. The review was accompanied by 4 stars out of 4, and within days our reservation book was completely full for the next 2 months. Local diners were followed by food tourists from Seattle and San Francisco, then by national food media, who had heard whispers about an exceptional new restaurant in the Pacific Northwest. 6 months after opening, James Beard Foundation representatives visited Luna Rosa, and I knew from the way they methodically sampled every dish that this was more than a casual meal. 2 weeks later, I received notification that I had been nominated for Rising Chef of the Year, an honor that would put me on the national culinary map. The nomination brought increased media attention and recognition from my peers, but it also triggered something I had been both hoping for and dreading: contact from my family. Carmen was the first to reach out, sending a message through Instagram that was carefully crafted to sound supportive while revealing how little she understood about what I had accomplished. "Sophia, I saw the article about your restaurant in Food and Wine. Mom and Dad are so excited about your success. We always knew you were talented, even if your cooking was too fancy for our tastes. Maybe you could open a Luna Rosa in Phoenix someday, and we could all work together." The message was infuriating in its casual rewriting of history. The same people who had called my cooking inedible and dismissed my dreams as fantasies were now claiming credit for having always believed in me. The suggestion that I should bring my concept to Phoenix and work together revealed that they still viewed my success as something that should ultimately benefit them. I didn't respond to Carmen's message, but it was followed by a phone call from my father a few days later. I almost didn't answer when I saw his name on my caller ID, but curiosity got the better of me. "Mija," his voice was warm and proud in a way I had never heard before. "I've been reading all these articles about your restaurant. I can't believe my little girl is becoming so famous." The casual use of Mija and little girl, terms of endearment he had rarely used when I actually was his little girl, felt manipulative and hollow. "Hello, Papa," I said cautiously. "Sophia, I want you to know how proud your mother and I are of what you've accomplished. We always knew you had something special, even when you were experimenting with all those complicated recipes as a teenager." This revisionist version of my childhood, where my experimental recipes were viewed fondly rather than criticized harshly, was so brazen in its dishonesty that I almost laughed. "Papa, that's not how I remember it. You and Mama told me my cooking was inedible. You said I would fail and come crawling back to work in your restaurants washing dishes." There was a pause, and when he spoke again, his tone was slightly less warm but still conciliatory. "Sophia, you're remembering things wrong. We were just trying to protect you from disappointment. The restaurant business is difficult, and we didn't want you to get hurt. But look how well everything turned out. Your success proves that we raised you right." The mental gymnastics required to transform their active discouragement into protective parenting and then claim credit for my success was breathtaking in its audacity. But what struck me most was that he genuinely seemed to believe this new version of events. "I succeeded despite your lack of support, not because of it," I said quietly. "I built this career entirely on my own, with help from mentors and colleagues who actually believed in my abilities." "Don't be so dramatic, Mija. Of course we supported you. Family always supports family. In fact, we've been thinking about ways we could help you expand your concept. The Rodriguez name has value in the restaurant business, and we could open Luna Rosa locations throughout Arizona and Nevada." The conversation had taken exactly the turn I had feared. They weren't calling to apologize for their treatment of me, or to genuinely celebrate my achievements. They were calling because they had identified an opportunity to profit from my success. "Luna Rosa is my restaurant, Papa. I'm not interested in franchising or expanding with your help. Sophia, be practical. You can't do everything yourself. You need experienced partners who understand operations and marketing. We could help you take this concept national." The idea of my carefully crafted, deeply personal restaurant being turned into a chain of generic Mexican restaurants with my name attached was horrifying. Everything I had worked to achieve, the authenticity and artistry that defined my cooking, would be destroyed in service of profit and expansion. No, Papa, Luna Rosa stays exactly as it is. I'm not interested in your help or your partnership. The rejection seemed to trigger his old anger and disappointment in me. You're making a mistake, Sophia. This attitude is exactly why we worried about you getting into the restaurant business. You're too stubborn and proud to accept good advice. Don't come crying to us when you realize you can't handle success on your own. He hung up before I could respond, leaving me with the familiar feeling of being simultaneously criticized and dismissed. The conversation confirmed what I had suspected. My family's sudden interest in my career had nothing to do with pride or love, and everything to do with financial opportunity. Over the following weeks, they continued their attempts to insert themselves into my success. My mother called to suggest that I should hire Carmen as my marketing director, since she had experience with social media and could help build my brand. Carmen herself sent multiple messages with ideas for Luna Rosa merchandise, cookbook deals, and television appearances that she could help coordinate. Each suggestion revealed how fundamentally they misunderstood what I had built. Luna Rosa wasn't a brand to be exploited or a platform to be monetized. It was a deeply personal expression of my culinary vision, a place where every detail was considered and every dish told part of my story. When the James Beard Foundation announced the winners of their annual awards, I was at Luna Rosa preparing for dinner service. Jessica, who had flown up from Los Angeles where she was working as a pastry chef, was helping me plate appetizers when Chef Moreau called with the news. Sophia, you won Rising Chef of the Year. Congratulations. The words didn't register immediately. I had been so focused on the daily operations of running a restaurant that I had almost forgotten about the award ceremony happening in New York that very evening. Are you serious? I asked, setting down my knife to give the conversation my full attention. Completely serious. They just announced it. You're officially one of the most promising young chefs in the country. The kitchen erupted in celebration as my small team of cooks realized what had happened. These were people who had believed in my vision from the beginning, who had worked long hours for modest wages because they wanted to be part of something special. Their joy at my recognition was genuine and infectious. That evening, as we served dinner to a dining room full of guests who had no idea they were eating food prepared by a James Beard Award winner, I felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with external validation. I had built something meaningful, something that honored both my heritage and my training, something that brought joy to others while fulfilling my own deepest creative impulses. The award brought renewed media attention and another wave of contact attempts from my family. This time, they were more direct about their intentions. My father sent a formal letter proposing a partnership agreement that would give them licensing rights to the Luna Rosa name and concept in exchange for providing expansion capital. The letter was written in legal language, suggesting they had consulted attorneys about how to formalize their claim to my success. They framed their proposal as a generous offer to help me grow my business, but the terms would have given them significant control over my concept and brand. I had the letter reviewed by my own attorney, who confirmed what I already suspected. They were essentially trying to buy their way into ownership of what I had created through my own efforts. The letter contained veiled threats about the difficulties of maintaining success without experienced partners and the risks of turning down family support. My response was brief and final. I sent a letter through my attorney informing them that I was not interested in any business partnerships with them, that I owned full rights to my restaurant concept and name, and that further attempts to claim ownership of my work would be considered harassment. The legal formality of that response seemed to finally penetrate their understanding that I was serious about maintaining independence from them. The calls and messages stopped, though I occasionally heard through mutual connections that they continued to claim credit for my success in social situations. A year after winning the James Beard Award, Michelin inspectors visited Luna Rosa. I recognized them immediately from descriptions other chefs had shared, but I treated them like any other guests, serving them the same carefully prepared food that I served everyone else. When the new Michelin guide was published 6 months later, Luna Rosa had been awarded 1 star, making me one of the youngest chefs and one of the few Latinas to receive this recognition. The citation praised the restaurant's innovative approach to traditional Mexican cuisine and noted my exceptional technical skill and creative vision. 2 years later, we earned our 2nd star. The inspector's report specifically mentioned the evolution of my cooking and the consistency of excellence that we had maintained despite increased attention and pressure. The third star came last year, along with the recognition that had brought me to tears on that awards stage. Standing there with the Michelin guide in my hands, seeing Luna Rosa listed among fewer than 200 three-star restaurants worldwide, I thought about that 12-year-old girl who had spent an entire day preparing mole poblano, only to be told her food was inedible. The same instincts that my family had criticized, the complexity they couldn't appreciate, the authenticity they found impractical, had led me to the highest level of culinary recognition possible. I had proven not just to them but to myself that their judgment of my abilities had been completely wrong. Tonight, as I stand in my kitchen preparing for another evening of service at one of the world's most celebrated restaurants, I still think about that conversation at the family dinner table, when they tried to convince me to give up my dreams. I think about my father's prediction that I would fail and come crawling back to wash dishes in their kitchens. I never did crawl back. Instead, I built something extraordinary from the foundation of my own determination and the support of people who recognized my potential. The family that raised me may never understand what I've accomplished, but I've created a new family of mentors, colleagues, and friends who share my passion for excellence. Sometimes the greatest success comes not from proving others wrong, but from proving yourself right about your own capabilities and worth. Luna Rosa stands as evidence that sometimes the dreams others call impossible are simply waiting for someone brave enough to make them reality. The invitation arrived on ivory paper with gold embossing, delivered by courier to Luna Rosa on a busy Tuesday morning. Carmen's wedding invitation, scheduled for 6 months from now at the Four Seasons in Scottsdale.
Inside, a handwritten note in my sister's familiar looping script. Sophia, I know things have been complicated between our family, but this is my special day, and I really want you there. You're my only sister, and it wouldn't be the same without you. I stared at the invitation for a long time, weighing the olive branch against years of dismissal and recent attempts to exploit my success. Part of me wanted to believe that Carmen's gesture was genuine, that perhaps my achievements had finally earned me a place at the family table. But the cynical part of me wondered if they simply wanted the prestige of having a James Beard Award winner and Michelin-starred chef at their celebration. 3 days later, my mother called directly, her voice carefully modulated to sound warm and maternal. Mija, I hope you got Carmen's invitation. We're all so excited about the possibility of seeing you again. It's been too long since the whole family was together. Hello, Mama, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Sophia, I know there have been misunderstandings between us, but family is family. Carmen's wedding would be the perfect opportunity to put all that behind us and celebrate together. And honestly, having you there would mean so much to all of us, especially after everything you've accomplished. The word misunderstandings to describe their years of criticism and recent attempts to commercialize my work was telling. It suggested they still didn't truly comprehend the impact of their treatment or accept responsibility for it. I'm not sure I can get away from the restaurant, I said, which was partially true. Taking time off during peak season was always challenging. Oh, but surely your staff can handle a few days without you. I've read that you have an excellent team. And Carmen has been talking about how proud she is to have such a successful sister. She's been showing everyone the magazine articles about Luna Rosa. The irony of Carmen now proudly sharing articles about my success, when she had once dismissed my cooking as intense and weird, wasn't lost on me. But something in my mother's tone suggested there was more to this conversation than wedding planning. Actually, Sophia, there's something else I wanted to discuss with you. Your father has been thinking about the future of our restaurants, and we've been wondering if you might be interested in consulting for us. Not a partnership, she added quickly, but maybe you could help us elevate our menu offerings. Bring some of that Michelin star expertise to our locations. There it was, the real reason behind the wedding invitation and the suddenly warm outreach. They had realized that my culinary reputation could benefit their business, and they were trying a softer approach to gain access to it. I'm not interested in consulting for your restaurants, Mama. We've discussed this before. But Sophia, think about the potential impact you could have. You could help us serve more authentic food, maybe attract a different clientele. It would be a way of honoring your heritage while building something together as a family. The suggestion that I could help them serve more authentic food revealed how little they understood about authenticity.
Their restaurants had built their success on Americanized versions of Mexican cuisine precisely because authentic flavors were considered too challenging for their target market. They weren't interested in authenticity, they wanted to capitalize on the trend toward more sophisticated Mexican food without actually committing to the complexity it required. Mama, authenticity isn't something you can add to an existing concept like a new sauce. It requires a complete rethinking of ingredients, techniques, and presentation. Your restaurants are successful because they serve what your customers want, but that's fundamentally different from what I do at Luna Rosa. Well, maybe we could start small. Just one signature dish that you could develop for us, something with your name attached to it. Chef Sophia's special or something like that. The idea of having my name attached to a single dish in their casual dining restaurants, surrounded by cheese-smothered nachos and oversized burritos, was almost comically inappropriate. It would be like having a single brushstroke by Picasso in a paint-by-numbers gallery. I'm going to pass on that opportunity as well, I said firmly. The conversation ended with my mother's disappointment barely concealed behind polite pleasantries, but she still pressed me about the wedding. Please think about Carmen's invitation, Mija. Whatever disagreements we've had, she loves you and wants you to be part of her special day. After hanging up, I found myself genuinely conflicted about the wedding. Despite everything that had happened, Carmen was my sister, and I had fond memories of our early childhood before the family dynamics had become so clearly defined. Perhaps her wedding could be an opportunity for reconciliation, a chance to reconnect with the parts of my family relationship that had been meaningful. I decided to attend, but with clear boundaries. I would go to support Carmen's happiness, not to rebuild bridges with parents who still saw me primarily as a business opportunity. I would be polite but not engage in discussions about potential collaborations or consulting arrangements. The morning of the wedding, I flew into Phoenix and checked into a hotel near the venue. I had chosen an elegant navy dress that was sophisticated but not attention-grabbing, wanting to blend into the background rather than become a focal point for questions about my career or restaurant. The ceremony itself was beautiful, held in the resort's garden with the Sonoran Desert providing a dramatic backdrop. Carmen looked radiant in her dress, and her fiancé David seemed genuinely devoted to her. Watching them exchange vows, I felt a pang of sadness for the relationship Carmen and I might have had if our family dynamics had been different. The reception was held in the resort's ballroom, elegantly decorated with desert flowers and soft lighting. I was seated at a table with distant relatives and family friends, which suited me perfectly. It allowed me to observe the celebration without being drawn into complicated conversations. Everything was going smoothly until the dinner service began. As the waitstaff brought out the first course, I immediately recognized the food as catering from one of my parents' restaurants. The presentation was their standard banquet style, large portions, heavy sauces and flavors designed to appeal to the broadest possible audience. The irony wasn't lost on me that Carmen's wedding reception featured exactly the kind of food my parents had always insisted people wanted, while dismissing the complex, authentic dishes that had earned me international recognition. Every bite reinforced the philosophical gulf between their approach to cuisine and mine. During the cocktail hour before dinner, several guests approached me after being introduced as Carmen's sister, the famous chef. The conversations followed a predictable pattern: polite interest in my restaurant, questions about celebrity chefs they'd seen on television, and suggestions that I should open a location in Phoenix. You know, one of David's uncles told me, there's a real market here for upscale Mexican food. You could probably do really well with a Luna Rosa in Scottsdale. I smiled politely and explained that Luna Rosa was intentionally a single location, that the concept required the kind of hands-on attention that wouldn't translate to multiple restaurants. But I could see in his eyes the same incomprehension I had encountered my entire life, the assumption that success should naturally lead to expansion and franchise opportunities. The most challenging moment came during the father-daughter dance, when my father took the microphone to speak about Carmen. His words were warm and full of pride, describing her intelligence, her beauty, and her bright future with David. He spoke about watching her grow up, supporting her dreams, and being confident that she would achieve anything she set her mind to. Listening to him lavish this unconditional support and belief on Carmen, I felt a familiar ache of grief for the relationship we had never had. This was the kind of parental encouragement I had craved my entire childhood, the faith in my abilities that might have made my journey less lonely and difficult. But as painful as it was to witness what I had missed, I also realized that I no longer needed it. I had built my success without their support, developed my own sense of worth independent of their approval, and created meaningful relationships with people who valued my contributions. After the formal speeches, Carmen found me at my table during a quiet moment between courses. She looked beautiful and happy, but there was something tentative in her approach. "Sophia, thank you so much for coming. It really means the world to me that you're here." "You look beautiful, Carmen. David seems like a wonderful man." She smiled, but then her expression grew more serious. "Listen, I know things have been weird between our family lately. Mom and Dad told me about some of the conversations you've had, and I just want you to know that I think what you've accomplished is incredible." I waited, sensing there was more she wanted to say. "I also want you to know that I never really understood what you were trying to do with your cooking when we were kids. It was so different from what we were used to, and I guess I didn't appreciate how special it was." This was the closest thing to an apology I had ever received from any member of my family, and coming from Carmen it meant more than I had expected it would. "Thank you for saying that," I replied. "I know my food was different from what our family was used to. I was trying to honor traditions that seemed important to me, even if they weren't practical for your restaurant business." "That's just it though," Carmen continued. "I've been reading about Luna Rosa, about the awards and the recognition, and I'm starting to understand that what you were doing wasn't impractical. It was artistic, and I'm sorry I didn't see that sooner." For the first time in years, I felt a genuine connection with my sister, not the forced politeness of family obligation, but a real understanding between two adults who had grown and changed since childhood. "I appreciate that, Carmen, and I'm genuinely happy for you today. You deserve all this happiness." We hugged, and for a moment I felt hopeful that perhaps some part of my family relationship could be salvaged, even if it didn't include my parents. That hope was tested during the final hour of the reception, when my father approached me with a champagne flute in hand, and the kind of determined expression that suggested he had been building up courage for this conversation. "Sophia, I'm glad you came tonight. Your presence here means a lot to all of us." "Thank you, Papa. It's a beautiful celebration. You know, seeing you here surrounded by family, it makes me think about possibilities. Your success with Luna Rosa has been remarkable, and I've been wondering if maybe it's time for us to work together on something. Not taking over your restaurant," he added quickly, "but maybe developing a new concept that could honor both your artistry and our business experience." Even at Carmen's wedding, surrounded by celebration and family joy, he couldn't resist another attempt to monetize my success. The persistence was almost impressive in its tone deafness. "Papa, I'm not interested in developing new concepts with you. Luna Rosa is exactly what I want it to be, and I'm not looking to expand or create something different." His expression hardened slightly, revealing the frustration that my continued independence caused him. "Sophia, you're being short-sighted. Success in the restaurant business requires growth and evolution. You can't stay small forever and expect to maintain your relevance." The condescension in his tone, the implication that my approach to my career was naive, and that I needed his guidance to achieve lasting success, crystallized everything I had learned about our relationship. He would never see me as an accomplished professional whose judgment should be respected. I would always be his daughter who needed correction and guidance, regardless of what I achieved. "Papa, Luna Rosa has 3 Michelin stars, and has been named one of the world's best restaurants. I think I understand something about maintaining relevance in this industry. Michelin stars don't pay the bills forever, Mia. Trends change, critics move on to the next new thing. You need to build something sustainable while you still have momentum." The irony of him lecturing me about sustainability while I ran one of the most successful restaurants in the country, while his own restaurants had never achieved any significant critical recognition, was breathtaking. "I think we should agree to disagree on business strategy," I said, keeping my voice even despite my frustration. As I prepared to leave the reception, Carmen hugged me goodbye with genuine warmth. "Please don't let tonight be another long gap between visits," she said. "I know Mom and Dad can be intense about business stuff, but I hope we can maintain our own relationship separate from all that." I promised to stay in better touch with her, meaning it sincerely. Whatever complicated dynamics existed in our family, Carmen had shown genuine growth and understanding that I wanted to acknowledge and nurture. The flight back to Portland gave me time to process the emotional complexity of the weekend. Attending the wedding had been both healing and frustrating, offering glimpses of reconciliation while reinforcing the fundamental differences in values that separated me from my parents. But it had also provided clarity about what I wanted moving forward. I was no longer interested in earning my parents' approval or changing their opinion of my choices. I had built a life and career that fulfilled me deeply, surrounded by people who understood and supported my vision. Luna Rosa continued to thrive, earning recognition as one of the most innovative restaurants in the Pacific Northwest and attracting diners from around the world. I had achieved everything I had dreamed of when I first left home to attend culinary school, and I had done it by trusting my instincts and refusing to compromise my vision. Looking back on that long journey from dismissed daughter to celebrated chef, I realized that my parents' lack of faith in my abilities had been a gift in disguise. It had forced me to develop self-reliance, to build my confidence independent of their approval, and to create success entirely on my own terms. The girl who had once cried over a rejected mole poblano had become a woman who could stand in her own kitchen, surrounded by awards and accolades, secure in the knowledge that she had proven herself right about her own potential. And that validation, earned through years of hard work and determination, was worth more than any family approval could ever have been. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.